Good morning, I'm Keith Bottomley. I'm the Deputy Policy Chairman here at the City of London Corporation. It's a great pleasure to see you all here and to be participating in this important summit and this session on building the future and particular focus around the built environment. So I'm delighted to be joined by a very distinguished and talented panel. Caroline Healy to my left here, who is Deputy Director of International Relations at UK Export Finance. Next door is Samir Sinha, who is Founder and Managing Director of Savi Group. Next door is David Cox, who is Managing Director, International Development, South Africa, Middle East and South America, Middle East and Africa. Apologies, David. Most important bit, Mott MacDonald. And not least at all is Sriram Krishnan, who is the Chief Business Development Officer at the National Stock Exchange of India. So just a couple of words from me by way of an introduction. I think the City of London, the UK, and cities in the UK's challenges pale into insignificance, really, when you look at the challenges that India is facing. Not only the scale as the world's largest population, it's rapidly urbanizing, and there is a statistic that says by 2080, the world's population will be 10 billion people, 80% of which will live in 10,000 cities. So cities are going to be a hugely important part of not just concentrating on built environment infrastructure, but also getting the planet to net zero. Just transition is very, very important to us all in doing this. And of course, India is a great source of global optimism and energy that we all value and admire greatly. Innovation, rapid adoption of new technologies, business and industrial giants in India harnessing are harnessed to national goals and an ambitious government framework. So our overarching question for our panel this morning is what's working already, that's underway, what requires international partnership, and what are the obstacles where we can all help, and in particular in the City of London. Now, I've got to be strict on time, so forgive me if I do overplay that slightly, but let's begin. Let me kick off with you, David, if I may. A big picture question, drawing on Mott MacDonald's experience of India, given the global competition for investment, what do you see as the case for investing in India and particular barriers around that?
Okay, thank you, and very pleased to be here. Good injection of energy last week. I was in Delhi for a week and got my usual dose of excitement and innovation, and gosh, could you do that, which was amazing. Huge question. To me, there's a competition, there's a global competition. There's a global competition for India against other nations, so why India? Actually, there's also a global competition for funding. A lot of other nations and a lot of other private companies wish to invest in India. So that competition is both ways. To be successful, then, we need a partnership, in my mind. And that is at a national level, which is great to be part of this event. But it's also at a project and program level. And thinking about success, as an investor, you want a stable ecosystem, transparent ecosystem for infrastructure across India. Whether it is a way of fairly evaluating each program, and if you're looking at a social context, making sure that you have through life costing through that program. So it's not just based on cost cheapest, but it's actually through life, and it has a social impact. It was great to hear from Vikram, the ambassador, saying that we now have a stable and a progressing court system, so you can have a fair arbitration. Some of our projects are stuck in arbitration from 15 years ago. So all these bits of ecosystem help a transparency and a confidence to invest. But then I thought about what makes a good project actually makes a good investment. And from our lessons of we've been in India for 50 years now, and we have a lot of scars on our backs of what's gone wrong. The things that have gone right are when it's a good program where you have shared values with the client. There's a real project with real buy-in from stakeholders. It's not just a one-off signature project, a vanity project. It's one that is a pipeline. There's visibility of that pipeline. It's where you have common processes of procurement rather than just starting. It's where you have processes of governance through that project to make sure that you have a way of evaluating progress and transparent progress. Two examples where we've used blended finance to succeed. One was UK government, which was DFID, now FCDO, funding an inception piece of work to look at climate impact of prosperity in urban infrastructures. So the concept of this was as a piece of consultancy that gets all stakeholders together, that defines the program, looks through the financing, and then gets buy-in. So right now that has moved into delivery. So UK government finance has now delivered a program of events in urban cities with climate resilience, funded by local urban, funded by federal government, funded by private investors, and that was all set up because of that consultancy that set up a good platform. Another project, VCIC, which is Chennai, I'm sorry, a city I can't remember or pronounce, beginning with V, 1,500 kilometer road, which isn't a road, it's about a prosperity corridor. It's got impact on women into jobs. It's got impact on environment. And that complex social impact project was set up, funded by Asian Development Bank, but didn't start until you got all stakeholders aligned through that consultancy to get a program that was successful. So I guess my key message in all this is partnership in the end gives the platform for a successful investment. And partnership where you involve the investor from concept, so we all know with what we're working with.
And social impact underlining the just transition.
Absolutely.
You mentioned blended finance. We might come back to that because it's an interesting topic. But let's move on to you, Samir. And from your perspective at Savvy Group, you make an interesting distinction between profitable sustainability and affordable sustainability. Tell us more.
Well, from an India perspective, I've been talking about sustainability for almost 2 decades. And from a conversation about what is sustainable development to affordable sustainable development, because the perception or the reality actually 10 years ago was that anything which is sustainable is expensive. So today, I'm very happy to say that the entire conversation is about profitable sustainable development, because today it is actually non-profitable to be non-sustainable. I mean, look at everybody sitting in this room. I don't think anybody practices non-sustainable development anymore, which is extremely encouraging, and which is, from a building sector perspective, in India at least, it is today cheaper to make green buildings than cheaper than non-green buildings. You would have to actually make an effort to make a non-green building. It's cheaper to build, cheaper to design, cheaper to operate. And the savings are huge, it's 30 to 40%. And in a country like India, where energy is expensive and there's a huge demand for energy, if you can save 40% on energy, I can say from my own experience that when I make buildings which are green buildings, and when we send an invoice for the utility bills per month, we say how much you've saved in this building because you are in a green building. And that amounts to almost 30%, 20 to 30% just on the air conditioning cost. So the challenge is that we are still looking at the economics of green building in a very myopic view. We only look at the cost of a green building. We don't look at the value that it creates. The value for the working space, the value for the business organization, the value for the well-being and productivity of the occupants. The challenge, like I said before, is that what gets measured becomes important, and what is important gets done. So what is very interesting that we are working on right now is to measure the productivity and wellness of occupants in a sustainable building, and how can we quantify that to a per dollar value. And if that gets done, which is hopefully by the end of this year, we will have a sample survey of 100 buildings, then it will be much easier for us to go out and say, this is what makes business sense, let's do this. And like I said, today we are in the pursuit of profit at all cost, which needs to change.
And we have a skills gap in construction in the UK and London. Are you finding the same thing? People that have got skills to be able to design, build and maintain these?
I don't think so. I don't think there's no challenge to design or skill today because it's a global world. We are competing with everybody else. There are foreign architects working in India. There are foreign consultants. All of us that here, he works in India as much as he works anywhere else. So I think the skill set today available is global, and there's no challenge on that. It's just the passion and the commitment that you need.
Okay, great, super. Caroline, let me come to you then. From a UK export finance perspective, let's talk about tools. So actually the ability to get some of this stuff to happen. What tools can you offer to support growth in India as well as exports from the UK?
So I think it might be worth just saying from the outset, for those people in the audience that don't know what an export credit agency is or who UKEF is.
Yes, good place to start.
Yeah, because I do appreciate it is quite niche. So UK Export Finance is a government department. We are an export credit agency. We are the oldest export credit agency in the world, which makes us very good at what we do. We use the strength of the government's balance books, essentially to provide either direct lending to a sovereign or an overseas contractor, or we provide the guarantee on a bank loan. So if we think now about the specific tools, we have a number of different facilities that, for example, an overseas buyer who, you want to do a big project in India, you want to purchase a range of goods and services, you might come to someone like UKEF and either have a direct loan from us, or you would have a guarantee on a loan that comes from a bank. The government, the UK government, is providing the guarantee, which sort of gives the confidence in that project. We have up to £4 billion worth of capacity to use in India. That's £4 billion. Our headroom is currently massive. We've used, I think, less than £50 million. So there is a huge amount of capacity. I should say that our finance that we provide is non-concessional. So that means that there is a premium to pay. We are selling debt products, if you like. It is commercial debt, it's on a par with the market. We exist to complement the private sector, not to undercut it. In terms of the services we offer, we can provide local currency financing. So we can finance in Indian rupee. We also have a global representative based out at the British High Commission in Mumbai. We offer bond products as well as debt. We work and we operate under something called the OECD arrangement, which is a slightly separate thing to the WTO. But if just for the moment, if you think about it on WTO sort of level, we've just negotiated new terms and conditions. That means that we can now offer longer repayment terms. So previous speaker was talking about managing rain waste. So for those kind of clean sector development opportunities, we can now offer up to 22 years for repayment terms, which makes that extremely attractive. In fact, it's not far short of a concessional offer. Shall I stop there for a minute? Because I could talk for hours about this, so I will pause.
That's really interesting. And I just want to pick up the point about blended finance now. Given what Caroline's just said, David, how should we be thinking about and actually really making the most of the blend of what's available in terms of Caroline's and other government money versus private
Yes,
funds?
Not my money.
Not your money.
No, 4 billion from me, I'm afraid.
But there's a lot of headroom there, obviously, which...
Yeah, I think the first thing is to think that India is many countries. It's not just one country, is it? It's got many, many different infrastructure challenges and many different urban situations. So what's needed in, say, Mumbai or Delhi may be something completely different if you go over to Assam or Tripura. So the return for an investor as a bankable project may be very good economic returns, but actually there's huge social need in other areas of India, which is when you then need to start thinking about different finance. Because as a straight investor, you may not get the returns in some of the more developing areas. And that's where you can end up with an aid. I'll use that. It's not a word I like using because it's very derogatory to my mind, but aid funding, where a government will directly fund some consultancy work or through grants to get projects off the ground, to build capacity in the local buying community, procurement community, because that then gives the confidence for the next layer of investment to come in, which may be through multilaterals, maybe through UK export, maybe through Asian Development Bank, and then private investors. So you can see many layers building up with the risk and return actually changing through those layers, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Capital markets, let's come on to capital markets now and to Sriram. So from the stock exchange's perspective in India and the important business of bringing together investors and infrastructure projects, what do you see as the principal role of India's capital markets in that space?
Well, as you can imagine, I mean, the stock exchange plays a very, very important role in this whole ecosystem. If you look at what the National Stock Exchange of India has achieved over the years, in the last 3 decades, we've helped companies raise a total of about roughly $200 billion based on current FX rates. And look at the market capitalization of those companies today. It's $3.5 trillion. 20% of that, roughly $700 billion, comes from foreign investors. And the share of infra companies in that 20% is about 50 billion. So we've seen about 50 billion, being the market cap of all the investments sent into the infra space till now. If we take a slightly more, extended definition of the infrastructure definition, right? Then I think that number can stretch to about 100 billion if you take energy, industrials, materials, and so on. So if you take Nifty, which is the biggest index of the National Stock Exchange, Nifty companies totally account for about 1.6 trillion in terms of market cap. And the share of the infra companies within that is 1/4, which is about 400 billion. So in number terms, I think the National Stock Exchange has been a very, very important cog in the wheel and helped companies raise money. We have a smaller exchange today, which is called a smaller platform called NSE Emerge, which is for the tinier companies, small, medium-sized companies, which are not yet massive. We've helped raise about $600 million so far for about 340 companies in this space. And these companies are today valued at about $8 billion. So the exchange has made it possible for companies to raise equity capital as well as capital in the form of fixed income, whether through dollar bonds, green bonds, and so on and so forth. Recently, we've set up an international exchange in a place called GIFT City, which has been given the treatment on par with a foreign country. And out there, we've already helped raise $80 billion worth of bonds. Issuance of bonds worth $80 billion have happened. And within that, 10 billion is for ESG, qualified bonds. So I think in this ecosystem, if you look at the role of an exchange, it's very, very critical because infra projects don't necessarily get bank funding so easily, and other sources of funding tend to be more expensive unless there are foreign investors who are able to participate in the project. So I think that's where we stand, and very, very happy to have been able to play this role and whatever we can do going forward.
And you're clearly prioritizing resources. Is there more of a priority you can place around resources to really get behind infrastructure, sustainable infrastructure?
Absolutely. So this is one question that's been, doing the rounds in our discussions. And one way in which we thought we can help the ecosystem is through municipal bonds. So there are about 13 municipal corporations in India today who have issued municipal bonds that have been subscribed, and these projects are all renewable energy-oriented projects. For example, the Indore Municipal Corporation recently did an issuance where even retail participants were allowed. And that was a massive success. And these are all bonds listed on our platform. So we are trying to do our bit, working with central government as well as the state governments to popularize the concept of municipal bonds, for example. Likewise, on the international exchange, we are trying to tell people that it's very easy to raise money in dollar terms. And the NSE International Exchange in GIFT City is going to be a platform which is going to cost a fraction of what any other international exchange costs in terms of the transaction cost itself to raise money. So our focus is on helping companies raise dollar capital as well as rupee capital and spread the message that the exchange is here to help you in every possible way.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Sriram, indeed. None of this happens, of course, without good leadership. And David, you talked about having a good program, shared values, social impact, but I want to come back to Samir on this question of leadership. Given all your experience of doing business in India, Samir, what do you see as the major elements of India's leadership in moving the global sustainability agenda forward?
I totally agree, Keith, that the most important thing, sustainability historically has been a top-driven almost mandate for most countries. This Kaiser come because climate change, unfortunately, is something that the common man does not feel in his daily life, the impact of climate change. So that is something that has come typically from top down, whether it is mandated by the political leadership or mandated by the corporates. I think India is very uniquely poised because we are very fortunate that the leadership in India, there's 3 qualities I believe that we need to really get the sustainability agenda forward. One is stubbornness, that you have to not give up. The second is passion for being sustainable. And the third is courage. And courage does not necessarily mean bravery, it means empathy for others. And that is something that is very, very visible in the leadership in India today. You'll be surprised to know, and Prime Minister Modi just mentioned this in the US, that India is the only country of the G20 group of countries that has actually fulfilled all its commitments of the Paris Agreement, and we're actually ahead of it. And those the targets are very, very ambitious. And that is the kind of leadership we fortunately have. And something that Srini might be able to validate, SEBI has required the top 1,000 companies listed on the National Stock Exchange and Bombay Stock Exchange to be pretty much ESG compliant. They have to file a report, right? I forget what the name of the...
It's a BRSR report. It's now mandatory for companies to report compliance and make those disclosures under that prescribed format.
Right.
So those are the kind of things that are happening already. But the one unique thing that India is doing, which I don't know if any other country has done yet, is Niti Aayog, and we have the leadership from Niti Aayog here, has something called Mission Life, which is again something which has been mandated by the government, where a lifestyle for the environment is the mission that Niti Aayog is promoting throughout the country, where they're nudging the common citizens towards a sustainable living. And these are small incremental changes which are being literally marketed through the society. There are ideas which are welcomed and which will be taken forward. So it's a massive program across the country, mandated by the government, being implemented by Niti Aayog, which is something which will really, so like I said, it is top down, there is the corporate involvement, and now they're building demand for this from the citizens. And of course, like I said, it's profitable. So
yes.
I don't think there's anything now missing in that picture.
I think that's always the challenge. Get investable projects is a really important part of, it has to be investable. David, do you want to react to what Samir has just said?
I was getting quite twitchy here because I was watching the time going down, but also this is like another topic into ESG in itself.
Yeah.
ESG set out as a real force for good. I do wonder sometimes whether it's a barrier to investors because they're so worried about, I looked yesterday, there were 9 different global standards with 3 or 4 or 5 letter acronyms, and there's a fear about dare you invest because someone might invest, particularly in the bond market.
Yep.
I think one of the things to remove in the bond market is a third-party reliance that stops people worrying about that investment in a new area. Sorry, I could go on for a long time on that.
No, it's a bit, Caroline.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to say that in terms of the UKEF business, we now have an objective that half our pipeline of new business will be in sustainable sectors. Yeah. So this is a real sort of drive for us. And I think, in the interest of time, I'm going to keep this brief, but my key message for anyone in the audience today is that we at UKEF, we want to do more business in India. We want to. We've got capacity and we've got the product suite, particularly thinking about sustainable infrastructure. So very happy to have conversations with people either today or follow up with us.
So Caroline's got her checkbook with her, and there's about £3.95 billion.
I have my checkbook
in the bank, so do take the opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you found that interesting, a really important topic. We could have spent a lot longer on it, so we've tried to do it justice in the time that we had available. Passion, courage, I love, stubbornness, I think, Samir, is often something that we need a bit more of as well. And let's try and live to some of those values. I think that would serve us all very well. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank our panel, and we'll move on to the next session.